Mountains. How we doing this morning? All right, I'm going to pretend like you were yelling louder than that because I'm in a good mood this morning, and I hope you are too. If you are new or newish around here, my name is Kyle, and yes, I am this excited, and I've only had one cup of coffee because I'm pumped for what we're talking about this morning. Like I said, if you're new or newish or you're watching online, we want to say love you, welcome you, we're glad you're here. I will be in the lobby afterwards, and hopefully I won't talk as fast as I am right now. But in the lobby afterwards, if you are new-ish, we have something called Taste and See, where you get to not only meet our staff and see our facilities, but really see the heart behind why we do what we do and how God might be calling you to be a part of it. Also, next weekend is something I'm very excited about. We are having a men's breakfast next Saturday morning. And just from my heart to yours, to the men here, if I could just get your attention, I was on a retreat about 3 weeks ago, and God just did something amazing in me in a men's retreat. And there was some part of me was like, God, thank you so much for what you're doing in my heart. But maybe more excited, I was like, God, I can't wait to go share this with the men of our church, men of all ages. So I got some college folks down here. Let me holler for your college boys over here. Some of you are like a little older than college. We love you here. So anyway, I just want to tell you, this Saturday, I want to challenge every man to find a way to get there. Get up early, record the college football game, and do something nice for your wife because she might have to take your kids while you're gone. Amen? Wow, okay, y'all gotta wake up here. Let's do this. So we are in week 7 of a series entitled This Is Life. This Is Life is essentially a 7-week picture of who we are and who we aspire to be. It's our values. And it's been great seeing new people come and get connected and say, oh, that resonates with me. Oh, I've never seen it that way. I really do think that might be a better life for me. So thank you for leaning into the challenge. Thanks for leaning into being connected in small groups, serving in ministry, making a difference. Thank you for leaning in and being part of this amazing life family. Our church is better with you a part of it. So, if you've missed it, here we go. We're in week 7. We started with the beginning that says Jesus is the center of everything. Week 2, the Bible's truth transforms us. Then we went to we're a church of and for imperfect people. So if you're imperfect, you're in the right place. If you're a perfect person, there's a church down the street that's great for you. And we love kids one at a time because we believe God loves them and cherishes them, and we do too. Then we talked about how you were made on purpose for a purpose. You're made to make a difference. And even if you believe in God or not, let me tell you what I believe about you, and that is that God has handcrafted you for a particular design. And I hope that you meet the God who made you and showed you what you were created to do on this earth. But that was a few weeks ago, so I'm back. Then we said last week that we are called to compassion, which essentially means that we see people's pain, we feel it with them, and then we're motivated to do something about it, and it connects us. This week, we're talking about our 7th and final value, and that's this. Generosity is our joy. Let me say it again. Generosity is our joy. To which no one said, amen. Yes, we're talking about generosity here. And now every single one of you who brought a friend with you this morning has your friend looking like, the very first time you brought me to church, it's a money talk. Oh, it's like every Sunday's a money talk. All these churches do is talk about money, 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 money. That should be a song. Okay, now some of you are like, wait. Generosity is our joy? But is it really? Like, have you ever gone to service, gone home and said like, oh, how was service? And someone said, oh my gosh, service was awesome. I got my seat right where I wanted it. It was right on the edge. So when the usher came down, he just put the basket right in front of me. I just got to put my money right in real quick. The giving of the offering was the best part of the service. Yeah, the guy played some cool music and the dude talked a little bit, but man, dropping the cash in the bucket, best part of service. You ever had an experience? I've never met anyone who says, hey, how was holiday shopping? Like, Black Friday was awesome. Yeah, I stood in a big long line and they were sold out of what I wanted by the time I got there, but it was awesome. There was a dude ringing a bell. There was a red can there. I got to give some money away. It was awesome. Said no one ever. And yet we're gonna say generosity is our joy, to which I wanna say, really? To which some of you, again, if you maybe heard this, Jesus said it, so he says that it's more blessed to give than to receive. I got one amen. Okay, here we go. To which everyone else is like, yeah, that's just something pastors say because they need to pay their own bills or something like that. Like, there's just like, what, is this really true? And I'm not really sure my lived experience believes that. You see, about 5 years ago, I was pastoring in Davis, and I was a college pastor, and so we would set up a worship service in a college lecture hall, and, we would start our service right as people are walking out from their class, and we're inviting them in to experience the love of Jesus. And one of those Thursday nights, I was looking at my phone and I get a call, and I'm like, huh? That seems like spam, but it's from Vietnam. Maybe it could be my uncle. So I answer, and it says, "Hey, Kyle, it's Uncle Barry." I said, "Oh, Barry, how are you doing?" And he said, "Did you watch the game?" To which I looked around at all my college students who I was supposed to be there leading to love Jesus. And I said, "Yeah, I did. It's the first time the Dodgers have gone to the World Series since 1988. And my very first sports memory ever of Kirk Gibson hitting that iconic home run. And we're going back to the series." To which he said, "Hey, I got an extra ticket if you want to go." To which I was like, "Yes!" And I'm literally running up and down the hallways, and everyone there is wondering if this guy has taken his med. Everyone walking out of Intro to Psychology is like, "Oh, I could diagnose that." And here I am so excited because I just got a free ticket to go to the World Series. And I just want to say, I've never had that experience when the offering plate has gone back to me where I get, I'm like, "Woohoo, it's time to give. I'm so blessed. I'm so lucky." So why is it that Jesus would say this? Is this some crazy thing about Jesus that we don't understand, or is there something that needs to change in our heads, our hearts, and our hands? Maybe we don't get it, or we need to change, or maybe we misunderstand Jesus. I've been wrestling with that. I went and looked, what do other folks say about generosity? I found a really interesting study done by Michael Norton. He teaches at the Harvard School of Business, and he did a study in which he gave college students $5. Said that you go spend it on whatever they want. Can anyone guess what the number one thing college students spent $5 on? Coffee. Yes, they did. And they went and came back and they said, "Hey, how did that make you feel?" And it was interesting. They said that those who bought themselves a cup of coffee were not as happy as those who bought somebody else a cup of coffee. So she said, okay, these are college students. They're on a meal plan. They probably have all their basic needs met. So what if for people who don't even have enough food to eat, what would happen there? And they go, and he did a survey of folks living in a slum in Africa, and the same thing. Those who gave experienced more joy than those who didn't. To which I know what some of you are saying, that's soft science. And come on, who in the debrief is going to say, "I was happier when I spent it on myself"? We know everyone's just lying to look good, right? And those of you who've been at church for a long time know what that's like. So, come on, if you don't laugh, it just sounds mean. No. But so they did it again. And this time, instead of asking them, they did fMRIs, meaning their brain was hooked up and they were measuring. And when people were generous, it would light up 2 major pleasure centers in the brain. And it wasn't just that. They said that the same health outcomes for giving were the same health outcomes as exercise. Greater joy, longer life, less stress. To which makes me think, maybe, just maybe, Jesus knew something we didn't, that it was more blessed to receive. And maybe Jesus knows something, and something in me's got to change. Maybe, this is my theory, I think you were created by a God who loves and loves to give, and he made you in his image, meaning you reflect him. Meaning that just like God was not created. Just like he created you to be like him, he created you to give. And when we do that, our lives live in the natural order. What I realized is my struggle with believing that it was more blessed to give than to receive had more to do with me than it did with Jesus. I realized that my life is like my life when I go to the chiropractor. I'm living my life and everything's great, and then they show me an x-ray of my spine, and I'm like, it's not supposed to look like that. And then they yank and pop, and ooh, I'm like, oh, I feel so much better. I'm better forever, right? My life has been realigned how it's supposed to be. And they said, no, you're gonna have to keep coming back because you keep having these patterns that lead you to walk wrong, to lift wrong, to do all these things wrong. And we've got to have some time to continue to correct it. And not just change what's on the inside, but then change the way you walk, the way you carry yourself, the way you lift. And this realignment is a piece of it. So friends, this morning, I want to invite you to be realigned to the true nature of reality, to follow the one who created you, to be more like him. And let's be clear. When a pastor stands up here and says generosity, the first thing you think is money, and that's fine. I'm gonna talk a lot about money, I get that. But let me be clear, what we're talking about is a generous heart that loves to give time, treasure, and your talents. Let me say it this way. There's not a single one of you who look and say, I don't wanna be married to a more generous spouse. Anybody who's been married any long time, when you are keeping track of who's done the most dishes, you're in trouble. Because then it's about a competition and who can do the most. Versus, hey, how can I love and give and be generous? You've worked for bosses who have both been generous with compensation, but also been generous in their spirit when they understand that you got a family emergency and you got to take a kid to the doctor or the dentist, and you see that generous heart and spirit like, oh, I actually want to be like that. And what I want to show you, what I want to get a picture of, is a picture of a God who's more generous than any human being could ever be. So generous that Jesus gives his life on the cross. Why? So that he could pay for our sin and save us from ourselves. And on the cross, what changed the world? Giving. And for us to say, if you're here and you say, I want to be a follower of Jesus, it means you've got to learn how to give. To which some of you are like, oh, looking for your wallets. Oh, I don't know if I like this. But let me tell you, I think it's a spiritual journey and a spiritual process. For those of you who are feeling uncomfortable right now, don't worry, I am too. For those of you like, I don't know what to do with this, I mean, just go back to what we said a few weeks ago, is that we're a bunch of imperfect people. And there's a reason only one of you amened to generosity is our joy, because our lives are out of line. So what would it look like to live in a pathway that says, I'm gonna become more generous? You see, friends, I've seen over time that there's these 4 movements, and I hope you see these 4 stages so you can identify where you are, but also have a vision for where you could go. And again, the goal is not to give more money away. The goal is to be more like Jesus, to have a more generous mind, heart, calendar, all of those things, to be a more generous person. There's no financial goal. It's not once I give this number, that's not it. It's becoming more like Jesus. Why? Because our church says Jesus is the center of everything, and I want him to be the center of your generosity. And only when Jesus is the center of your generosity will you actually find joy. Last disclaimer before I tell you about these 4 things. Listen, if you are here today and giving does not bring you joy, don't do it. You're not doing it right. Don't give to our church, because all you're gonna do is say, oh man, they're taking all my money and are they giving me enough back? I don't want any part of that. I don't need your money, I don't want your money, but Jesus wants your heart because he loves every single piece of you. So let's look what a journey might look like. You see, there's these 4 places of this journey, and usually I see it begin with this first one. This is what I've seen in most people. The first one, their first financial gift, or the first time they serve something, it's a compassionate cause. I remember when I was a little kid and I saw the picture of the starving kid overseas. I was like, we should do something about that. For some of you, it's not overseas, it's in your own home. Your home has been plagued maybe by breast cancer, and you say, we're gonna go and we're gonna do this walk to raise awareness and money for breast cancer because that's close to me. I see pain and I wanna do something about it. For some of you, it's not that. There's a problem in our society, and you say, I wanna give time, money, energy, and I wanna fight that problem, and it usually starts there. Maybe you've taken that step, maybe you haven't. But here's what I hope happens to you. I hope when you do that, something in your brain goes, this is awesome, and I want to do it more. And then you move from what I'm going to call a compassion cause first gift to a second thing, and that's becoming a consistent giver. This past Tuesday night, we were, our whole church was amazing. We had elementary kids, junior high, high school. We had parents doing a small group. It was awesome. And afterwards, I went up to one of our volunteers, who I'm going to put on the older side of the spectrum, interpret that however you want. And I went up to him, and I'm like, bro, I've never seen you so happy. To which he said, every Tuesday night, I don't want to come. I don't want to volunteer. I don't want to lead a small group. I don't want to do games. Every single week, I don't want to do it. And then 2 hours later, I'm never happier than I am after volunteering with junior high and high school boys on Tuesday nights here. So he says, I do this consistently. And you could think, you're doing it for other people. I say, no, this is just the most fun thing I have every week. I said, to which I said, how does your wife feel when she hears you say this? Here's my number. We'll do some marital counseling. I got a couch. Don't worry. Come in, tell me how you feel. Okay, so there's this place where you say, I've done it once and I like it. And then it becomes a consistent part of your life where you're consistently giving money, time. Again, for a lot of people, the first consistent thing they've done with money, and this may not be you, this is probably about 10% of you though, is the first time you gave consistently might have been to sponsor a child overseas through World Vision, through Compassion International, and you start doing all these things. And let me just tell you, I've never met a person who gives consistently to someone, to one of those kids overseas who says, you know what, when money's tight, I'm gonna cut that. Because what happens is their heart begins to be transformed. Their priorities become to be transformed. And what you're seeing is this move into Christ-likeness. It says, I actually wanna give those $30 away more than I want my pumpkin spice latte. Sacrilege, I know. So it starts one time, compassion, cause. Then there's this place, consistent giver of time, treasure, talent. But then there's this third movement. And here's the place that I think I need the most nuance. Again, I named it with a C just so you could remember it, but it's not the most accurate title, so I'll admit that. And this is what I want to call a Christ-centered giver. And here's it. This may not be you. This may never be you. I want you to become more generous, but let me just tell you, you may skip over to step 4, and that's great. If you're not a believer in Jesus, you may go straight to 4, and I hope you do. But number 3 is, for those who want to be a follower of Jesus, there's this place as a Christ-centered giver that says 2 things. Number 1, everything I have is a gift from God. Therefore, I give back proportionally to what he does. The scripture teaches about proportional giving. One of that, we talk about the tithe. The tithe is just a churchy word for 10%. So essentially, the Christ-centered giver says this: everything I have is a gift from God, and as a way to say thank you to him, I'm going to give the first 10% back. To which I'd like, Jesus ain't good at business. He should hang out with that Harvard business professor. He gives 100 and gets 10 back. And really what it is, he says, it's not about the percentage, it's about the heart. Do you give your first back to him because you believe that he's given you everything? And this is a struggle, friends. Why? Because the harder you work, the better you are with money, the more self-sufficient, the more you want to believe that it's your money and you did it and you made it and you can do whatever you want with it. Friends, this is why money is so uncomfortable. Let's just talk about this heart issue here. The reason money is so uncomfortable is because it's such a heart issue for us. For us, money is about what I earned. It's my status. It's my provision. It's what I trust to make sure that in 50 years from now, my life is better. Money becomes some sort of God that we worship and trust that tells us how valuable we are and how safe and secure we will be in the future. And when we live that way, what happens is we actually take the place of God and use money as a way to measure it. But what I want to do is take that little weed that says, I'm going to trust money more than I trust Jesus, and I want to uproot that this morning. We'll get there in just a second. But here we go. We've talked about compassion. We've talked about consistent. And now there's this Christ-centered that says, everything I have is a gift from Jesus, therefore I give back proportionally back to him. But here's where I want you to get, friends. Here's where, whether you believe in Jesus or not, I want to tell you this is the best life you could live, and that's this. The people who have the greatest joy giving are the folks who are catalytic givers. Catalytic givers meaning they say, what I can do with my money is amazing. And I can spur transformation and catalyze hope and healing and recovery for folks all over. And here's what happens with every catalytic giver I've ever met. What happens is they get so excited about what they can do, about what they're gonna do, about the cause, about what it may be. But then what happens is it catalyzes something in their heart that says, I gotta figure out how to do more of this. I gotta figure out how to give more, make more, invest more time here. I know people at our church who have said, you know what? Actually, my greatest opportunity to give to the world is actually not financially, but I know people who've said, I'm gonna retire early so I can volunteer. I met a real estate developer who said to me, yeah, I think I'm gonna retire a few years early because I have this skill as a draftsman, and every nonprofit I know needs a draftsman and needs someone who can run a nonprofit. So I'm just gonna run nonprofits and do draftsman work for people. To which I was like, do you know how much money you just left on the table? He's like, Kyle, I've already given significantly of my wealth. I have actually more wealth than I could ever spend. And wealth, actually, there's no sacrifice in that for me. I was like, oh, nice to be you. And then he said, but this is the thing. I can always get more wealth. I can never get more time. And I want to give away what's most precious to me because I want to be close to the things I love. I was like, oh. This is a man who first saw stories when his daughter came back from a trip overseas, and he said, I can do something about that. To I can do that regularly. To I can give more, and now I'm figuring out how do I give my whole life away. He volunteers to teach a class, a real estate class, taught me real estate. He mentors and teaches in his school. He runs all of these things. Why? Because he realized that to become more like Jesus means I have to become more generous with my time, which is probably your most scarce resource, with your treasure, that thing you really want to hold on to, but also your talent. Some of you have unbelievable skills, and you have an opportunity to give them away. And for you to become more like Jesus means we learn how to do this. However, that sounds great, Kyle. This 4-step progression sounds awesome, but some of you are like, I don't really know. Some of you are like, I don't believe that, I don't feel that, I don't practice it. Some of you are how I felt at the beginning of this sermon where I'm like, is it really more blessed to give than receive? I'd rather take the Dodger tickets than the offering plate, right? So what would have to happen for you to live in such a way that Jesus' words were actually true to you, and you actually thought them, believed them, experienced them? What would have to happen to realign, like I realigned my spine, to realign yourself with the reality that you were created to give? And this really is the greatest thing. Let me share my experience. 3 things with me had to change. 3 things had to shift for me to live into this reality. The first shift is this. The first shift is a head shift. And the head shift is this. For those of you taking notes, the head shift is this. It's a shift from scarcity to abundance. From scarcity to abundance. I first learned about this term, Myth of Scarcity, from an Old Testament professor named Walter Brueggemann. He wrote a book that talked about how the people of God in the wilderness, if you don't know the story, the people of God were enslaved in Egypt. God rescued them and said, hey, I'm gonna take you to a promised land. It's gonna be awesome. But they had this 40-year period in between, because they didn't have Google Maps. And they just kept going, and it took them so long. And every day, God would miraculously provide everything they need, every single day. But every single day, they'd wake up and say, what if God doesn't provide tomorrow? Listen. 39 years of God being faithful day in and day out, and at the end, they were still afraid that God would not show up tomorrow. Brueggemann calls this the myth of scarcity, which comes from our heart issue that says we want to be in control of our own provision. We want to trust ourselves instead of trust Jesus. This is why money becomes so difficult for us. But Jesus has an antidote for this. How would you have an antidote for the fear of scarcity, which is what many of us wrestle with? Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 6. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and flip there. And in Matthew chapter 6, what we see here is Jesus saying, I know you're afraid of running out. And so much more, right? He's speaking to the ancient Near East where 85% of the people were day laborers. 85% of the folks to whom he's speaking are day laborers, maybe even more, because wealthy folks are probably not coming out to hear him speak as often because they don't like what he has to say. So in this, to these folks who are literally afraid they may not have a job tomorrow, this is what Jesus says in Matthew 6, verse 25. Therefore, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, what you will drink, or about your body, or what you will wear. Isn't life more than food and the body more than clothes? I think if he said this in our day to day, he'd say, do not worry about inflation, gas prices, and interest rates. Don't worry that there's conversations about downsizing and layoffs in your job. He says, do not worry about all of those things. To which some of you are like, well, that doesn't help. You ever been there and someone says, don't worry? You're like, I'm not worried. I'm just wondering very consciously about what's going to happen next. I'm telling you, when people tell me not to worry, I'm like, well, you should be worried. If you were as smart as I would, I know all the things that are about to happen. You would be worried too. I must be smarter than you and work harder than you. If you want to, yeah, so. And then Jesus makes it even better. For those of you who are not worriers, you're going to hate this even more. I just want to be there with you. Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or stow away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. And here's the question. Here's literally the heart question, the head question, the critical question for your faith this morning. I really do believe is this. Are you not much more valuable than they? You think Jesus is going to take care of the birds, the plants, the animals, and not worry about and not take care of you? Some are like, yeah, but there's global warming and the fish aren't that good, so maybe God's not taking care of everything. The whole world is coming to an end. To which you have to ask the question, would Jesus give his life on the cross to later abandon you? Because your 401k went down? Because you lost your job? Because you can't pay your rent? This is the question we all have, and it all is different at a different time. As a college student, man, gosh, can I pay for gas? Later is, can I pay rent? And then it's like, oh my gosh, can I pay this mortgage? And then you go, oh my gosh, can I put my kids through school? There's always something to worry about. That's the human condition. And Jesus says, will you trust me with your future more? He says this. After he talks about the birds and all that, he ends with 27. He says, can any of you by worrying add a single hour to your life? To which those of you who are like me, who are on the worrier side of the spectrum, if you're here like me, you're like, all right, Jesus, here you are, talking about the birds and the air, and don't worry. And you just sound like you're going all Bob Marley, but like, don't worry, be happy, everything's going to be all right, man. And you're like, what the heck? Jesus just grew dreads and is way too chill. I'm worried about him. Some of you are saying, Kyle, how do I really do this? Because some of you, this is hard for you and it's hard for me. Let me just tell you a little bit about my story. Well, I was raised by two parents who grew up in poverty. They built a very successful business and were going to sell it for millions. Literally 3 days later from going towards retirement in that moment, I'm a sixth grader. And as a sixth grader, 3 days later, they literally lose everything. And the family vacation we had planned got interrupted. We still took the family trip because we'd already paid for it. But between here and the Christian camp we went to, we went and stopped at the courthouse steps and declared bankruptcy. Creditors came after our house. We couldn't keep the lights on. And in the midst of this little sixth grade Kyle developed this heart condition of scarcity that says, God, I'm always afraid it's not gonna work out. I don't know what's created your scarcity. I don't know it's because you're a high performer. I don't know if it's from tragedy there. I don't know, it's like, well, Kyle, I lived through 2008. I did too, I was in real estate at that. I've been there. I don't know what it is for you, but here's the solution. Some of you say, don't worry. Have a head shift from scarcity to abundance. How do I actually do this? Let me wrap up this shift with this thing. About every 3 to 6 months, I remind you of this principle. It's a very transformative principle for me. It's when I understood that the biblical or the Hebrew view of time was not looking forward, but actually looking back. And it was saying, you don't worry about the future. You actually look back on what God has done. And essentially how God taught the Israelites to live was to walk backwards into the future. Some of you have heard me talk about this and you're still afraid I'm going to walk off the other edge. I get it. Some of you are like, Kyle, this seems like the worst planning ever. Don't get me wrong, my first job was in financial planning. Both my brothers are financial planners. I'm not saying don't plan, but here's what I am saying. What happened behind you is more powerful than what happened there. When I look back and say, the creditors got paid off when we kept our home. The lights got turned back on. That moment where me and my wife had one baby and were pregnant with a second one, and we got evicted thinking, I can't do this on a single salary. We can't do this. And my gosh, my wife's, she's just gonna trade income for childcare, and all of it didn't make sense, and God miraculously provided. You see, friends, what actually gave me faith for the future was not a spreadsheet that told me about my future earnings, which I'm sick and I have, but it's not that piece. It's looking back and say how God has never failed me yet, and so I trust that I believe that he will continue to come through. The head shift from scarcity to abundance is a shift of saying, I'm going to remember what God has done and trust that he will provide, because no one is smart enough to predict the future. They're wanting to predict the future so you'll click on their headlines. They're going to talk about inflation and gas prices and all of these things. And what I'm going to tell you is, through thousands of years of human history, longer than that, God has said, I love you more than I love the birds. Will you try to just be like one of the birds and come sit in my hand and let me care for you? The way a baby bird allows a mama bird to come and provide everything you need. I know you want to fly out of the nest and be the big bird yourself. It's a bad line, but will you allow me to provide? I just killed the moment. Let's keep going. All right. Head shift from scarcity to abundance. All right, here we go. I'm going to try and here we go. Heart shift. The heart shift is this: from self to others. This is what Jesus says about our money. It says that your money actually has power over you. Let me explain. Verse 19. Jesus says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and vermin do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Say, what? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What does that mean? Some of you are like saying, wait, does that mean if I invest in eternity, that'll get me into eternity? No. What does it mean? Let me talk to those of you who have purchased a house. I know not everyone here has, but let me talk to you. Do you remember that time right before you closed escrow and you were scared to death because you're like, I can't afford it, and everyone's older saying, this is a great thing, and it's all going to work out. Like, I have no money. All of my check is going to be do this. I'm going to be working DoorDash and Uber Eats and every single extra shift I can get. Why? Because I just can't know how I'm going to do this. And then you buy this house and you're like, oh, I love this. So much cooler than my apartment. I don't have people up ahead of me going, when I have parties, it's awesome. But then you put all this money into it and all this time, and now you love it, and now what do I got? I got to go paint this. So I got to go to Hobby Lobby and Home Depot and get some stuff. And then if you're going to paint that beautiful wall, then what do you got to do next? Then you got to go and get like the perfect little picture on there that says, faith, love, and hope, or, this is where the kitchen is, or whatever. I don't know what it is. We have one in my house that's, there's one in my house that says kitchen, and someone asked, why do you have one that says kitchen? And my 9-year-old Josiah said, because Dad doesn't know where the kitchen is. So that's the story there. But in this, what happens is you keep investing more and more, and then what happens, and then you've redone every room, and then you gotta do the backyard and then the front yard, and then by the time you've done it all again, what do you gotta do? You gotta go redo that first room, because that color that you picked 10 years ago is no longer cool anymore, so now you gotta start the whole process all over. Why? Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be. The more you spend on something, the more you love and care about it, and it owns more of your affections. And I am not against any of those things. I am not. But I just wanna tell you, the more you put money into something, the more you care about it. Whatever you collect, the thing that you spend the hours on YouTube researching, the thing that you've spent your life building that skill, it defines you. If you have spent your life a trade, whether you're a carpenter or a realtor or whatever, that becomes your identity because you've spent so much time in it. Your heart is wrapped up in your identity. And this is what Jesus is saying. So going back to what the smart dudes from Harvard and the MRI folks said is actually when we buy ourselves the cup of coffee, when we provide for ourselves, it actually doesn't make us happier. And there's this heart shift that says, my money is a means to make me happy, to a means to bless someone else. That is the heart shift. The head shift after you can trust God. The heart shift when you can say, I found something that I'm more excited to spend my money on. When I was in high school, my favorite thing to do was to go out to lunch with all my friends. I had this awesome minivan. Everyone was jealous. All the guys who drove Camaros are like, oh man, I'll trade a souped up Camaro for your minivan. I'm like, you're right. So we'd all jump in there. We'd all go out to lunch, and it was so much fun. And then we'd come back late because I'm the driver and I'm ADD. And so everyone's like, you rode with Thomsen, didn't you? Like, yeah, sorry. So they're like, okay. They want to take a license away, not because I'm speeding, though I was, but just because I couldn't get back on time, and all the teachers hated me for it. So, and in this moment, I had this shift where I then went and traveled. That same year, I went and traveled overseas to the Philippines, and I saw kids walking in a garbage dump collecting plastic bags, and if they got enough plastic bags, they could then provide and buy one meal for themselves. And then I heard that for 25 cents, I could feed one of those kids. I'll tell you, when I got back, I still loved going out to lunch, but that soda did not taste nearly as delicious. That $1 that I saved, so much more valuable to me. Why? Because I saw it, my heart went there, and then the money followed. And the more money that went there, it just catalyzed my heart, and I loved it more. And throughout my life, there's these times where I say, I can spend this on myself, or I can spend it on others. And I will tell you, I've never regretted spending it on others instead of myself. I have nice things, great house, my wife has me well dressed, all of those things. But let me just tell you, this is transformative for your heart. And remember where we started. Finances are a faith and a heart issue. I don't want your money. I don't need your money. Jesus definitely doesn't. But what he does is he wants to reorient your heart from selfishness, where you trust self, where you provide for self, to where you become more others focused. This is the greater journey. This is where freedom comes from. Because it doesn't matter how many times you remodel that room in your house, it will never fully satisfy you. Every time I've bought a new TV, 3 months later, I'm like, I should have got the bigger one. Sorry, I'm seeing spouses talk during that one. Let's keep going. First shift, head shift from abundance, or from scarcity to abundance. Second, from self to others. And the third one, real quick. We're gonna get really practical. Then I got a testimony video. We're gonna land the plane here. Here we go. The hand shift is this. It's from haphazard to intentional. From haphazard to intentional. Let me tell you what Jesus says. Verse 33 of chapter 6, he says this, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. He says, hey, trust in God and invest in what God cares about. And God cares about people. He cares about eternity. He cares about human suffering. These are the things that God cares about. Invest where God cares for, and he will take care of you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. I don't want to be that flippant. This isn't totally accurate, but what I want to say in my heart is, I don't really care what you do with your time, treasure, and talent. I don't really care how much you put in an offering or volunteer. I mean, I do, but that's not really it. What I really care about is that you learn how to live a life that trusts Jesus and lives for his purposes. So whatever your plan is, let me be clear. Some of you say, God's saying, don't make a plan, don't make a plan, don't make a plan. No, he's actually saying the opposite. He says, make a plan today and then live by it later. And I don't know what plan you need to make today, but whatever it is, I just want you to make it today. And I don't know what your plan is. Maybe it's this. Maybe some of you friends, you are in such financial heartache from medical bills, credit card bills, and from things that you've done or things that have been done to you. This idea of being generous, you just can't do it. And what I want to tell you is the plan you need to make is not about how you give more, but it's about how you save more. It's about how you pay off debt faster. And I'll tell you, after you've done all those things, then let's come back and talk about generosity. But the plan you need to make is to get your own finances in order, because you're not at a place to be generous because your financial life is out of control. And if that is you, please do not put money in the box when you walk out. But if that is you, come and tell someone. And we have folks in this church who are trained in financial counseling that would love to walk with you so that you can find freedom in that area. Because in the same way finances can create great joy, it can create great stress. And God wants you to be free from that. Maybe it's free from the guilt, maybe it's free from the poor decisions, maybe it's from that, but make a decision today. Maybe you're here and you're like, I don't know if I believe in Jesus, but the Harvard guy says that generosity is good, so what do I do? Maybe this. Maybe what you do is every time you go out this week, every time you have the opportunity to tip, you just say yes. Why? When I don't tip my barista, I'm there to, what I'm currently saying is, you are a coffee drug dispensary that's there to make me happy. And if you don't make me happy with my drink, I'm gonna come back until you get it right. But when I say, oh my gosh, if I have the luxury of being able to spend $4.50 on a latte in the middle of the afternoon, hopefully I got an extra $1 that I can pass on and invest. And when I say, no, you're actually a human being, not a human doing that's created to serve me, I then live into the order of creation. Friends, if you don't believe in Jesus, do that for 7 days. Come back and tell me next week if you did not find more joy every time you spent money on everything. And I guarantee you will. Why? Because I know the one who made you and I know how he's ordered creation. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's actually like, I don't really have money to do that right now, but what I do have is time. I just talked to a family in our church recently where the wife is like, man, I love coming to this church. We're here, and I want to volunteer in kids ministry, but I don't want my kids to have to go to 2 services because I don't feel like that's really good for them, so what do I do? And the husband said, well, how about this? How about we'll go to worship as a couple together in one service, and the next service, what I'll do is I'll go take the kids and then get special dad time because they don't get it as much as they'd like during the week, and you can go and do this thing where you volunteer, and both the mom and the dad said, I'm going to be generous with my time in different ways. Maybe you're here and you're like, ooh, I want to walk through those steps. Maybe it's the first time you want to give to something. Maybe it's this church, maybe it's something else, I don't know. Maybe you're like, I want to become a consistent giver. Friends, let me just be clear. Even if you've not been a consistent giver to our church, I'll tell you, if you don't trust church or don't trust that, give money consistently to a charity or something that you believe in, and I'll tell you, you will care more about that than ever. I met a guy at our church who volunteered as a board member of a nonprofit, and he went to all the board meetings, and when he found out their needs, he's like, oh, I can meet all those things. He's a contractor. And so what he did is he renovated all 3 of their buildings at cost. And they're like, oh, that's such a big sacrifice. He's like, no, it's not. That's my favorite thing to do. I work with jerk, big, wealthy folk. Sorry, that's not, I'm not trying to create class war. He says, let me just be clear. I work with larger, more difficult contracts and clients on a regular basis. So to be somewhere where I can actually see that this place that I have rebuilt with my own hands and my team has actually allows a woman who's suffering from domestic violence to have a place to stay, that's the best investment I've ever made. Maybe you're at a place where you're like, okay, maybe I need to be a proportional giver. Maybe you're at a place where you realize, oh my gosh, there's something that I have inside of me that I just want to give more. I don't know where you are, but let me be clear. Today, I just want you to have a conversation with Jesus because this is about spiritual growth and it's not about money. And to help me illustrate that, I want to tell you a story or show you the story of a young couple in our church who have recently kind of walked this journey. And I want you to listen to the head shifts, the heart shifts, and the hand shifts they've had. And we'll come back and we'll wrap it up. Take a look.
I'm Victoria, and this is my husband,
Brady.
We've been coming to Life Community since February, so that would be
8 months.
8 months. That's almost, wow, we've almost been here for a year. That's crazy. I've always gone to church my whole life. My grandpa was a pastor, and then that's the church that I just grew up going to until I graduated high school. And then I've just always known that you need to tithe and that it's just something that you do as a Christian, and as once you start getting a family or once you start having your own job, you just kind of want to give something back to God. And so then when Brady and I got married, we were living in Chico for like 2 years, and we never really found a home there. as in like a church, we kind of were just kind of going all over the place, and then sometimes we would go on Sundays, sometimes we wouldn't. So I never really felt like a want to kind of give to a church during that time. And then we moved here in January once you started your job, and we kind of were looking around at places, and we fell upon this church, and I felt a want, probably in the beginning when we were like, okay, this is the church we're going to keep going to. I kind of started feeling a want to give to God, which is giving to the church, but I just always think of it as like, I'm giving back to God, and then once I felt that, Brady and I kind of started talking about it, and then so happened that Pastor Kyle ended up doing a sermon on tithing, and then that's when Brady was like, yeah, let's do it.
I think for me, what had happened after hearing Kyle, I like deals, so Kyle said, just try it for a couple months, and if you don't like it, the church will happily give your money back. And I just was like, all right, Holy Spirit, like, I hear you loud and clear, like, let's do this thing. And so we were sitting on the parking lot, and we both looked at each other and we're like, I guess it's time to flip the switch and turn it on. And so when we did that, it was an instant step in my faith with trusting God. And it had built confidence in us and in myself more specifically. And one thing that I think I was actually like longing for, but I didn't know that step would have taken me there.
And I think that it wasn't even about like the money at that point. It was just like kind of like the saying of like, give it all to Jesus. It was just kind of like, we're gonna give it to him. And it just kind of like was such a great feeling. It's like, we're giving it all to him, and we're putting our lives and our faith in his hands, and he's gonna do what he wants with us. And it was just kind of like a really overwhelming, like, just good feeling,
Yeah.
And it's weird that it's like you're giving your money away, but it's almost like it comforts you knowing that you're giving it to him. It's like a weird thing once you start doing it.
Yeah, and it honestly introduced like a new pair of glasses for me too, because I had never let that aspect of my life, like the financial side of my life, be in the hands of Jesus, right? And doing that allowed me to think of things differently and look at my life from an outside point, looking in like, what other aspects of my life could I give to Jesus, and how could that impact me, and how could that impact my marriage, and just how could that be a role model to my spouse, and just got me thinking in those different ways as well. And after doing that, for like building our confidence and seeing the financial side of things start growing for us in ways, I don't know how long after it was after we started tithing, but Victoria and I kind of just like looked at each other and were like, dang, like it literally feels like God is just throwing money in our bank account, and it's just increasing, right? And it's like we had hardships along the way. Like, we experienced a scamming incident, and we really didn't feel it.
Me losing my job.
Yeah, Victoria, Tahoe Joe's closed down where she was serving, and after the initial ball was rolling for tithing, like, the losing the job and that incident was just kind of like a minor blip. Like, it was looked at as an inconvenience, not like a devastation in our lives. And it wasn't more so like oh my goodness, like, what do we do now? It was really just like well, what kind of door is going to open next?
It wasn't a devastation, it was an inconvenience. As we wrap up and the worship team comes out, there's this piece where I said, man, Jesus does not want your money, he wants your heart. He wants you to trust him so much that your head has so much faith in him that when things come back, oh, that's an inconvenience, not a devastation. He wants your head to trust him so much that when you hear words like recession or inflation or gas prices or any of that, you say, oh my gosh, those are powerful economic forces, but none of those are as powerful as my provider. I think what he wants is your heart to be so alive that you found something in your heart that gets you so excited that you're like, I want to give more, I want to serve more, I want to do more. Why? Because my heart loves it. It makes my heart come alive. I think what he wants to do is train your hands in such a way to use your time, talent, and treasures to bless and serve the world. And you realize, oh my gosh, it's so much more amazing to give than to receive. And then you realize, oh my gosh, God has blessed me with all of these things and allowed me to give them away. You see, friends, I think God wants to so transform us that we're a church when we say, hey, we're about compassion. Because of the generosity of this church, we can feed as many folks as come on a Friday night to our food pantry as possible because you've chosen to say yes. Imagine being a church where we say, hey, we love kids one at a time and we put our money where our mouth is. That we believe that camps are a life-changing experience and we never ever want a kid to not be able to participate because of finances. And we can look at every single one of our kids and say, a stranger that you've never met yet has already paid for you to go to camp and experience the love of Jesus. Imagine, friends, if it all goes back to what we started, is that Jesus is the center of everything. And everything in your life revolves around him. Every decision you make. And in the end, you say, it's Jesus. My finances revolve around him in the good and the bad. In the bad, where it feels like it's spiraling out of control, I know that Jesus holds my life in orbit. But also, he's created me in such a way that everything I have is a gift from him. And it's my gift, my joy, to be more like Jesus. Friends, my prayer for you is that your heart will become more like Jesus and you truly will find the joy in generosity. Let's stand as we worship and give our worship back to Jesus this morning.